Imagine a prison so cruel, so inescapable, that being sent there was considered a death sentence. A place where men weren't just locked away, they were left to rot, starve, and die in silence. The French called it the dry guillotine. Prisoners called it hell, and yet one man who swore he was innocent refused to die there. He endured starvation, torture, disease, years of brutal punishment, and isolation that would drive most men insane. But instead of breaking, he planned the impossible, an escape that no one believed could ever succeed. This is not a movie. This is the true story of Papillon. And once you hear what he endured and how he tried to cheat death itself, you'll understand why this prison was feared more than the guillotine itself. So yeah, let's start with Henri. But nobody called him Henri. They called him Papillon, which means butterfly in French, because of the butterfly tattoo on his chest. And believe it or not, this butterfly was about to be trapped in the worst cage imaginable. It's 1931, and Papillon is convicted of murdering a pimp in Paris. Now here's the thing. He swears he's innocent. Doesn't matter. The French justice system ships him off to French Guiana, to what they called the Bagni, the penal colonies. But this isn't just any prison system. This is a machine designed to kill you slowly. Picture this. You're crammed into a ship with hundreds of other prisoners, chained together, sailing across the Atlantic for weeks. Men are dying from disease, heat, and despair before you even reach your destination, and when you finally arrive, that's when the real nightmare begins. French Guiana wasn't just one prison. It was an entire network of camps scattered across this disease-ridden jungle and rocky islands off the coast of South America. The mortality rate, about 75%. Most men never made it home. They died of malaria, yellow fever, dysentery, or just plain desperation. But Papillon wasn't planning on dying there. From the moment he set foot on that cursed land, his mind was already working on one thing: escape. Alright, let's talk about what daily life was actually like in this place. I'm warning you, this gets pretty brutal. The prisoners called French Guiana Green Hell, and that name fits perfectly. You wake up at 4 a.m. to the sound of guards screaming. Your breakfast? A cup of coffee that's basically hot water, and maybe some moldy bread if you're lucky. Then it's off to work. Clearing jungle, building roads, hauling rocks under the blazing tropical sun. The heat is unbearable, but that's not even the worst part. The mosquitoes carry malaria and yellow fever. The water gives you dysentery. The food, when there is any, is crawling with maggots. And the guards? They treat you like you're already dead. Now here's where it gets interesting. Papillon wasn't content to just survive. While other prisoners were losing hope, he was making connections. He befriended a guy named Louis Degas, a counterfeiter who had money hidden away and could fund escape attempts. Smart move, because in a place like this, you need resources if you want to have any chance at all. But the thing about prison escapes is this: they're not just about getting out, they're about staying out. And Papillon was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Okay, so here's where things get wild. Just months after arriving, Papillon and a few other prisoners make their first escape attempt. They break out of the camp and make it to the coast, where they steal a boat and sail toward Colombia. For a brief moment, Papillon tastes freedom. It's the salt air, the open ocean, no guards screaming at him. But then reality hits. Their boat breaks down, they run out of food, and they're captured by Colombian authorities who send them right back to French Guiana. Now, if you think the regular prison was bad, wait until you hear about the punishment for trying to escape. They throw Papillon into solitary confinement. But not just any solitary. This is a stone cell on Isle St. Joseph, one of the small islands off the coast. The cell is completely dark, barely big enough to lie down in, and filled with insects and rats. You get one meal a day, if you can call it that. It's basically slop pushed through a slot in the door. No sunlight, no human contact, nothing but darkness and the sound of your own breathing. Most men go insane within weeks. Papillon spent 2 years in that hell. 2 years. But here's the thing that's absolutely incredible. Instead of breaking him, it seemed to make him stronger, more determined. And when they finally let him out, pale and skeletal, but somehow still alive, he had only one thing on his mind: escape. So after serving his time in solitary, they transfer Papillon to a work camp in the jungle. And this is where his story takes another dark turn. He befriends a group of lepers, people with leprosy, who were basically outcasts even among prisoners. Now, most people were terrified of lepers back then. But Papillon saw opportunity. The lepers had more freedom to move around because nobody wanted to get close to them. Smart thinking, right? He convinces a few other prisoners to join him in another escape attempt. This time, they plan to head upriver, into the jungle, cross into Brazil, and disappear forever. The plan actually works at first. They escape the camp, steal supplies, and make it deep into the jungle. But the jungle is unforgiving. One by one, his companions start dropping out. Disease, exhaustion, fear, it breaks them down. And when they finally reach a local tribe, hoping for help, they're turned over to the authorities instead. Back to prison, back to punishment. But this time, they're not taking any chances with Papillon. They're sending him to the place where escape is literally impossible. They're sending him to Devil's Island. Now here's the thing about Devil's Island that most people do and realize. It was actually the main prison. It was where they sent the most dangerous political prisoners, the escape artists, the ones who couldn't be broken by regular punishment. This tiny island, barely 34 acres, sits about 7 miles off the coast of French Guiana. It's surrounded by shark-infested waters, massive waves that crash against jagged rocks, and currents that can drag you out to sea in minutes. The French authorities called it inescapable, and for good reason. Officially, no one had ever successfully escaped from Devil's Island. Papillon arrives there in the 1940s, now in his 40s himself, after more than a decade in the prison system. He's older, scarred from years of punishment, but somehow his spirit is still intact. The guards think they've finally found a cage that can hold this butterfly. The conditions on Devil's Island are even worse than the mainland camps. The cells are tiny stone boxes. The food is barely enough to keep you alive. There's no work, no activity, just endless, mind-numbing isolation. It's designed to drive you insane before it kills you. But Papillon isn't giving up. In fact, he's studying the island like a scientist. The tides, the currents, the guard rotations, the supply boats. Because believe it or not, he's planning something that nobody thinks is possible. So here's where Papillon's story gets absolutely incredible. While other prisoners on Devil's Island are slowly going mad from despair, he's quietly observing everything around him. And what he notices gives him an idea that's either brilliant or completely insane. You see, Devil's Island sits right where two major ocean currents meet. Most of the time, these currents will drag you out to sea or smash you against the rocks. But Papillon realizes that at certain times, during certain tides, there's a window where the current actually flows toward the mainland. The plan he comes up with is simple but terrifying. He's going to collect coconuts, lots of them, tie them together into a makeshift raft, throw himself into the ocean during one of these tidal windows. Coconuts will keep him afloat, and if his calculations are right, the current will carry him to the mainland. Now, let me be clear about something. This isn't just dangerous, it's basically suicide. The water is full of sharks. The waves can crush you against the rocks in seconds. The current could just as easily drag you out into the Atlantic, where you die of thirst and exposure. But after more than a decade in hell, Papillon figures death is better than spending the rest of his life in that cage. So he starts collecting coconuts, studying the tides, and waiting for the perfect moment. Alright, so here comes the moment you've been waiting for. It's sometime in the early 1940s. The exact date is disputed, and Papillon has been on Devil's Island for years. He's gathered his coconuts, he's studied the currents, and he's picked his moment. Picture this. It's the middle of the night during a storm that's creating massive waves, but also the tidal conditions he needs. Papillon ties his coconuts together into a crude raft, fills a bag with what little food he can scrounge, and makes his way to the edge of the cliff. Below him, the ocean is a roaring black monster. Waves are crashing against the rocks with enough force to pulverize a human body. The wind is howling. Somewhere in that darkness, sharks are waiting. Any sane person would turn back. But Papillon isn't sane anymore. He's desperate. And desperation can make a man do impossible things, so he jumps. He literally hurls himself off a cliff into shark-infested waters. Trusting his life to a bunch of coconuts and his calculations about ocean currents, the guards later said they heard a splash, but they figured the ocean had just claimed another suicide. They didn't even bother to search for a body. But Papillon didn't die. Against all odds, his coconut raft holds together. The current does carry him away from the island. And somehow, he survives the night in those deadly waters. Now here's where Papillon's story gets complicated, and honestly, a bit controversial. According to his own account, he washes ashore on the mainland, makes contact with local people who help him, and eventually makes his way to Venezuela, where he lives as a free man for the rest of his life. He claims he spent weeks floating on that coconut raft, surviving on rainwater and coconut milk, dodging sharks and navigating by the stars. It's an incredible story of human endurance and determination. But here's the thing. Some historians doubt parts of his story. They point out that ocean currents around Devil's Island don't actually flow the way he described. They question whether the coconut raft escape really happened, or whether he might have escaped from a different prison under different circumstances. And you know what? It doesn't really matter, because the truth about Papillon isn't in the exact details of how he escaped. It's in what he represented. The unbreakable human spirit. The refusal to give up even when everything seems hopeless. What we know for sure is this. Henri, the man they called Papillon, did eventually make it to Venezuela. He did live there as a free man until his death in 1973. And he did write a book about his experiences that shocked the world and helped expose the brutality of the French penal system. So what's the real story of Papillon? Is he an innocent man wrongly convicted, or a career criminal who spun an incredible tale? Did he really escape from Devil's Island on a raft of coconuts? Or is that just one of the greatest prison break stories ever invented? The truth is, we may never know for sure. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the power of Papillon's story is in its historical accuracy. It's in what it says about the human capacity to endure, to hope, and to fight for freedom, even when all seems lost. The French penal colonies in Guiana were shut down in 1953, partly because of the international attention brought by stories like Papillon's. Devil's Island became a tourist destination, and today you can visit the ruins of those hellish cells where men once waited to die. But Papillon's butterfly tattoo, the symbol that gave him his name, means something more than just decoration. Butterflies represent transformation, rebirth, the ability to emerge from darkness into light, and in a place designed to crush the human spirit, one man managed to transform himself from prisoner to legend. Whether every detail of his escape is true or not, one thing is certain. In a place built to destroy men, Papillon never let them kill his spirit. And that's why his story still haunts the world's most feared prison. And why it continues to inspire people who refuse to give up, no matter how impossible their situation might seem. If this story moved you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and share this video. Because sometimes the most incredible human stories are the ones that remind us what we're capable of when we refuse to surrender our hope. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful prison breaks happen not when we escape our physical chains, but when we refuse to let anyone cage our spirits.